Reminder to the hosts and participants of the anti-Iran conference, those who attended last US anti-Iran show are either dead, disgraced or marginalised. And Iran is stronger than ever. The Polish government can't wash the shame. While Iran saved Poles in World War II, it now hosts a desperate anti-Iran circus. And for more, I'm joined in studio by Senior Middle East Correspondent Mohammed al-Kassim. Mohammed, looking at Iran's status in the region today, here we're seeing Lebanon saying that it won't be attending the summit in Warsaw. Of course, 80 countries have been invited. Lebanon boycotting this conference. We're hearing Javad Zarif calling it an anti-Iran show of sorts. What do you make of the timing of this, knowing that Zarif has just left Lebanon?
Absolutely no coincidence. I believe that the Lebanese and Iranian officials have chosen their time to make this announcement. They could have done it before the foreign minister, Mr. Javad Zarif, arrived in Beirut for a meeting with his counterpart, the Lebanese foreign minister, Gibran Bassil, but they chose to do it after his departure or while the visit was ongoing. And that sends a message to the region that Iranians' influence in the region, not only it's continuing to expand, but it's strong. Not only in Lebanon with Hezbollah, but this was made as part of a meeting with the Lebanese government. So not only with the with Iranians' proxy Hezbollah, but also it's expanding and very strong in Syria, neighboring Syria, and elsewhere in the region. I mean, it's not a secret how influential the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and this General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. They have an army within an army in Iraq with al-Hashd al-Shabi, the paramilitary Shiite militias in Iran, and they pretty much in a way control what's happening in Iraq. So Iran has strengthened itself and kept or became a regional hegemony, so to speak, since the Islamic Revolution erupted 40 years ago. And this is one of the positives that the Iranian regime can tell its people. Now, there are other things that they may try to hide from their people, but definitely the Iranian influence in the region is expanding, and it's not only worrying Israel or the U.S., but also regional Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, even Egypt and others. And for that, Iran wants to continue its influence, not only expanding, but strengthening it and making it there to stay for as long as they can keep it.
You say that, of course, these are the ambitions of Iran, but what tools is Iran actually using, or Tehran actually using, to consolidate its power in the region?
A number of tools. First of all, they used to, when they were able to at least bring in some cash in from the oil that they used to send to sell before the recent U.S. sanctions on them. They used to supply millions of dollars to Hezbollah. They used to supply their proxy groups in the region with weapons, money, training. The same goes in Iraq. The same goes in Syria with supporting President Bashar al-Assad, not only with money, but also with foot soldiers, and keeping his government intact and able to stand the opposition attacks for as long as they did.
Now, let's bring in another voice. Mohammed, Senior Fellow at the Security Studies Group, Matthew Brodsky, joins us now. Matthew, when we're hearing calls from U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who, of course, will be at this U.S. Poland-sponsored summit, when he calls for Iran to behave like a normal country, what is he actually calling for?
He put out a plan, I think it was about 11 points a few months ago, that he would like Iran to abide by. And as he puts it, that would be essentially just to act as any normal country would, which isn't, trying to dominate its neighbors and do all of the things which Mohammed laid out quite well. So I think he's basically saying that is what the United States is looking for. And by doing so, he's also stressing what was the missing component of the nuclear agreement in 2015 with Iran, which was that it only partially addressed their nuclear program, but most importantly, did not address any of its behavior. And so the U.S. is really after a behavior change in Iran, which would certainly change the circumstances in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. we know that that would be quite an uphill climb. So we'll see what happens.
So then in terms of its, I suppose, as both you and Mohammed are pointing to successful expansionist efforts, as Iran works to comfortably, I would say, establish close ties with the Assad government in Syria and then further enforce Hezbollah, which of course is now comfortably itself established as a political force in Lebanon, what is a country like Israel to do?
Well, at this point, it has already been, since 2011, essentially the only Western military, if you will, that's been taking the fight to Iran, because the United States has only been authorized to go after ISIS in only circumstances where they've been attacked or threatened that they struck back at Iran. So Israel will probably have to widen the range of where it attacks in Syria. But Netanyahu, of course, has been careful to explain specifically to a public audience that he's willing to strike wherever it is. Lebanon, of course, has separate rules that exist there, where it would probably lead to a much wider conflict between Iran and Israel, encompassing everything in the Middle East, essentially. That probably will stay on the shelf for a while, because no country wants to see that happen right now. But Syria and perhaps even portions of Iraq, where Iran has been shifting its weapon production capabilities, that could see something heating up more with the United States approval. Most likely.
Now, Mohammed, looking at the landscape as it stands, especially in the context of 40 years since the Islamic Revolution in Iran, just the pure symbolism or the optics of Israel sitting around the same table as these Gulf countries, how threatened is Iran feeling ahead of this conference on the 13th, 14th?
There are a number of messages being sent from this Warsaw conference, the upcoming conference. No one really thinks or believes that we will get any solution other than statements from this conference. But the mere picture of seeing Arab officials standing side by side with Israeli officials, in addition to other European and American officials, will send two messages, one going in the direction of the Palestinian Authority and the other one in the direction of the Iranian government and Iranian regime, saying that the entire world is uniting against you and you are both isolated. And as Europe has been trying, or the European Union has been trying to say that they are not really in agreement with President Trump on withdrawing from the Iranian nuclear agreement, but being there and talking about Iran without Iran being there and without the Palestinians being there, those are two messages, negative messages, worrying and concerning messages that are being sent from Warsaw to these two entities. In Ramallah and in Tehran. But it's definitely a message from President Trump saying that he is working on isolating Iran from the international community.
Matthew, back to you. Why then Israel, being the tiny nation that it is, I suppose geographically in size, I'm referring to it in that respect, why is Israel such an aggravating force for a country like Tehran? Why does it continue to be a thorn in the side of Tehran?
Right, of course. That's the great question, because there's obviously no territorial dispute. It's not a neighbor. It's 1,000 miles or more away. It's one of the pillars of the Iranian Revolution was to be against the United States and against Israel. So it used to be, frankly, the center of gravity. You could always get everyone to agree in the Middle East that Israel needs to be destroyed or one way or another wiped off the map. Of course, now we've seen, after many, many years, it's become more obvious that Israel and the Palestinian dispute is not to every other dispute in the Middle East. And of course, now we've seen quiet relations develop between Israel and several Gulf partners, specifically Saudi Arabia, and the relations with Egypt are quite good as well. So we've seen now that Israel more has a backing of much more Sunni powers as it faces the far bigger threat, which has always been developing in the Middle East. And that, of course, is Iran. So to the extent that we'll see the Palestinian-Israeli conflict take center stage, as we know, a peace plan will be put forward at some time soon, we'll see. The issue of Iran remains the biggest motivating factor for most countries in the region.
So, Mohammed, what's your view on that?
Three reasons why I do believe that Iran and the Iranians dislike, hate the U.S. as well as Israel. First of all, their historic support of the Shah of Iran. Secondly, They believe that Israel has supplied the Shah of Iran with weapons that was used on Iranians, and they had good relationship with them, and they never forgot that. But also the Palestinian issue. The Iranians, as well as many other Muslim countries, as well as Arab countries, don't view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as that Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's more of an Islamic conflict, and they are part of it, and they want to make sure that the Palestinians do get their land, which they call the West Bank and Gaza, as occupied land from Israel. So those elements altogether make us understand why the Iranians do hate the U.S. as well as Israel.
Okay, Mohammed al-Kassim, thank you for that insight. And of course, Matthew Brodsky from Washington, D.C. We're going out for a break. After this, how will those who never experienced their